Welcome back to Shit Creek Survivors. We share stories of resilience and tools for resilience. Now, this week we're joined by Mark Astor, who is a lawyer and advocate who helps families navigate substance abuse, mental health, and addiction crisis. Now, Mark's going to share his journey from prosecutor to founding a law firm focused on supporting families nationwide. We'll discuss resilience, grit, legal strategies, and the family dynamics that make or break a recovery. This is a must listen if you or someone you love is facing addiction or mental health struggles. Let's dive in. First off, Mark, if you could kind of just explain, who are you?
So I'm a lawyer. We're based here in South Florida. We have a couple of other offices in Florida. We also have one in Boston. And as you pointed out, I mean, our mission these days, because it's sort of, as the business has evolved, our mission is slightly changed, but the focus is the same. So the mission is to save families whose loved ones are suffering from substance use, mental health disorders, and failed attempts at recovery. So we are talking to families, most of whom actually are outside of Florida. They call us from all over the country. Far west is Hawaii, as far north as that whole New England corridor, and occasionally from outside of the country. And what those families typically have in common is somebody in the family, usually an adult child, with a long history of drug use and mental illness and treatment that never seems to work. They're probably med non-compliant. They've probably been a guest of the state, either through the criminal system or the mental health system. They may even have suffered an overdose or two. And the family calls us and says, hey, we're done. We can't take it anymore. We hear you have this thing that you do to save families. Can we talk about it? And I'm like, sure, let's have a chat. And that's what we do.
Oh, that's amazing. I need to hear how that works. So, because that makes a lot of sense, especially from our previous work where you'd actually get calls and you show up at houses where there is someone in crisis, and it could be an adult child who's still living in the home, may have some sort of something going on mentally, but at the same time they're consuming drugs. You don't really know what's going on really when you get there, but I understand the crisis in that moment and the family seeming so scared and just kind of exhausted, so when they call you, what kind of relief are you able to offer them?
Yeah. So Cam, there's three components to what we do. Obviously, as lawyers, the first component is going to be legal. So there are basically three statutes here in Florida that allow us to give a family varying degrees of control. So it really depends what the family wants. At a minimum, the family wants to send somebody to treatment. And we will need to keep them there long enough, because recovery, as I tell families, is a journey. It's not a destination. It's a process. So we use these three statutes. Now, it might be we just want to send them to treatment, but it might also include, well, we need access to their medical records. They have resources that we don't want them to burn through. So we want to restrict that. We might want to restrict their ability to travel so they don't leave, or take away a driver's license, or, have access to the medical records, whatever it happens to be. Make sure they take their meds. Because if you don't make sure they take their meds, inevitably the state will do it for you. And that tends to be a disaster. So it depends on what kind of control we need. And there are really three statutes that we use to make sure that we get the control. So the legal is the bit that my team handles. Now, the second component is what I call clinical. So a lot of the time, not every time, a family will come to us and they say, listen, we're working with a specific treatment center, so we got that bit covered. Okay, great. Sounds good to me. Now, if they don't have that bit really figured out, I have two clinicians on staff. One's a forensic psychologist, one's a licensed clinical social worker. And if they want, they can hire those guys and they can figure out what is the most clinically appropriate facility, because it has to be clinically appropriate. It has to meet the needs of the patient. Otherwise, this is just an exercise in futility. And obviously with the legal stuff.
Some of my questions.
What's that?
You're already answering some of my questions. I was just about to say, what about, how are you going to, but if you got, people that know the forensics and the psychology of it on staff to help push it that direction, that guy has to be a big hurdle that is overcome.
I mean, it's really important for us to try and, at least clinically, try and diagnose the patient, because then we know what options are potentially available for treatment. And the third component is what I call law enforcement. So I don't know if I told you guys, but I was prosecutor for a long time. I did some defense work. But I have on staff of a retired cop. So John is a retired DEA. He's got a lot of friends, in law enforcement, but he leads a team of investigators, and they're really important to us because we get calls for people that are missing. They're on the streets. They walk out of treatment. And
Right.
as much as I'm a fan of our men and women who wear the uniforms, sometimes they don't have the resources to go looking for people. So we got to go do it for them. And if I can get a judge to give me some type of pickup order, which is, akin to a civil arrest warrant, then we can call law enforcement and say, hey, we found this person. We have a court order on our hands. Can you send 2 officers down to execute this thing and get this person off to the place, at the designated receiving facility? So we find those 3 components really, really help us. And they work well
Yeah.
together. But these cases are unpredictable. Somebody who's got, a severe substance use disorder and mental health issues can be good one minute and bad the next. And that, makes the work rewarding, but at the same time challenging and stressful.
Right.
So, my team, because this is all we do, right? I mean, we sort of know that there's going to be some unpredictable moments, and we know that our clients are highly emotional, and we're sort of geared to handle that. So it's a real labor of love. But listen, it's ironic. We came on, and I just got done reviewing a retainer. We just had a family that hired us on a case, so it never stops. I mean, I tried to stop working on the weekends, but there's too many people that need help, and this is my passion. So I typically
Yeah.
work at least 6 days a week, if not 7. I love doing it.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure everyone that you service and help really appreciates it. Just don't go burning yourself out. All right.
Yeah, that's true
Well,
too. But I wish I had this information about 15 years ago on several different cases or different situations. In fact, I have one that's coming to mind right now. I'm going to be passing your information on to them after we're all done. But we'll talk about that offline.
well, I had a lot of time where I was lost and wasn't doing much in my life, so I'm making up. I'm making up for time that
There you
got
go.
wasted. So,
That's a
um,
perfect segue. Tell us about it.
Yeah.
well, so as I told you, I was a prosecutor. I was a prosecutor here in Palm Beach County from '94 to '99. I had interned with the state attorney's office in 1993. And I think the minute I stepped into the courtroom, I was like, this is where I'm supposed to be. To be honest, I wasn't real passionate about the law. I can't tell you I was a particularly good law student because the whole law thing didn't really jive with me, but I got in the courtroom and that really resonated with me. And they hired me right out of law school. I was prosecutor for 5 years. Now, as you gentlemen know, when you work for the government or the state, it's not a particularly well paying
Right.
profession, but
Familiar.
the professional satisfaction that I got really outweighed, the poor pay. I loved it. And when I was in a felony trial unit and trying 1st and 2nd degree felonies, and I either had the victim of a violent crime or, if it was a murder case, I had the family of a decedent, getting them some closure was really, really, I can't even describe the feeling. It just really felt good. I always felt like I was doing the right thing. I mean, you
Yeah.
can't unring the bell, but you can give a family some closure. And I really enjoyed that. But especially my last year there with the state, I was in trial every single week on these serious felony cases. So that meant I was working late at night. I was preparing on the weekends. And, after 5 years and trying a couple of hundred jury trials, I was pretty much done. And when I look back at it now, I wish I'd have stayed a couple more years because they actually offered to make me the chief of one of the satellite offices, and I declined it, which I wish I hadn't have done. But I guess it's all part of my journey, so maybe it was the right thing. I just didn't know it. In any event, I left. I did defense work for a couple of years. I was completely miserable. I didn't enjoy the work. It paid much more, but that didn't really seem to satisfy me. I got married and divorced. I was married at 34. I was divorced at 35. And I was really lost after that. After I got divorced, I spent a year in DC. I worked on a presidential campaign. I went back to school, got my master's in law, but the candidate I worked for didn't win, so I had to come back. So there was no government job for me. I came back. I spent a couple of years here back in Florida. I worked in family businesses. Um, I tried desperately hard not to practice law because I just couldn't find that passion. In 2011, I took what money I had left because I lost a lot of it in the '08 crash, and I ran off to California for 3 years. And I basically spent 3 years tripping the light, fantastic, having a good time. I took the bar exam out there twice. I failed it twice. After 3 years there, when I was completely tapped and had no money left, I came back to Florida. I took it one more time. I got within a percentage point of passing the bar exam there, but still failed it. And I was really bummed about it because I'd spent an entire year studying for the California bar. I had a friend of mine who had a criminal practice out there that was basically begging me to come out there and build it with him. And I couldn't pass the bar exam. I think I spent 3 weeks studying for the Florida bar. I popped out of law school. I worked during the day, studied at night, took 3 weeks off, studied for the bar, and went right back to work. And here I was. I couldn't pass the bar exam in California. And, friends and family kept saying to me, "You're not supposed to be there. This is the universe. You're not listening."
Yep. Can be.
And then basically I met somebody that completely changed the direction of my life. So I got invited to a breakfast meeting down in Miami. It was a 7:30 breakfast meeting, which meant I had to get up at like 4 to get there. And it was hosted by a gentleman by the name of R. John Robbins. R. John Robbins runs a company here in South Florida, and they service law firms all over the country, called How to Manage a Small Law Firm. They teach lawyers the business side of being a lawyer. They're how to be an entrepreneurial lawyer. And I saw him speak to a room of about 25 lawyers about the business side of being a lawyer, which is not something they teach us in any law school anywhere in this country. I don't care where you went, they do not teach us this stuff. And that really resonated with me because I had a father that left school at 14 and a mother that left school at 16. When they met, they didn't have two nickels to rub together. And over the years, they built businesses together. Some worked, some didn't. Some made money, and some they lost their ass on. So the idea of building a business while still practicing law really resonated with me. And at the end of his little speech, I begged the guy for a job, and they hired me. And I was doing sales, and I was learning a lot about being an entrepreneurial lawyer. But what I didn't realize when I went to work for this company was that at their very core is that they are a personal growth company for lawyers. Can you believe that? I mean, if there was ever, chalk and cheese or oil and water, it's personal growth and the legal profession. And right, financial growth must be preceded by personal growth. And what I did after a year there, I realized what I'd failed to do both personally and professionally was I had failed to take 100% responsibility for my life, for the good and the bad, the successes and the failures. And that's why I was bloody miserable, because I wasn't taking responsibility for it. I wasn't owning it. Right. If I wasn't making money, that was on me. If I couldn't meet somebody and, that I could have a functioning intimate relationship with, that was on me. And I decided after a year there, it was time. I wanted to open up my own law firm, and I had close family members and friends. And I said, okay, that's who I'm going to help. And I really didn't know how I was going to do it. I had a general idea, but obviously what we have today is completely different from what I started with in February of 16, when I sat down in the local library here because they had free Wi-Fi and cheap coffee. And that's where I started the law firm, out of the library.
That's beautiful. That's amazing.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yep. I was broke. I had no money.
Yeah. And the fact that it's grown so much, but you just kept putting into it, and you didn't know where it was going to go. And that's amazing. That's amazing. And so you learned a lot of tools then, I'm guessing.
I did.
In that. And it sounds like self-accountability. That's something we talk about a lot, for a long time. I was a victim, I was waiting for someone to come save me, someone to come fix me. And I found out that nothing was going to change unless I started making changes, and I had to take accountability, just like you said. It's funny how we learned that in our shit creek. You're sitting there and you're like, oh no, I'm the only one who can get me out of here. And, you have to figure it out from there. So beyond just being, self-accountable, what other tools would you say you learned through that? I would assume patience as well, right?
Yeah, not one of my stronger attributes, but 11 months in, I lost my dad.
and
I'm
so sorry.
Just finding the money to pay for a funeral was a real struggle. And my father, did not die a wealthy man, so there wasn't like a trust fund to tap into. And friends of mine said, "Well, did he leave you any money?" I said, "No, he left me He left me two things more important than that." They said, "What were they?" I said, "Balls and brains," AKA grit. Right?
Mm.
The willingness to stop feeling sorry for myself, get off my ass, pull on my big boy pants, and go to work and make it happen. That's what my father left me. That was the gift that he gave me. And we still do it. I mean, I still use that. But I think having having the listen, life will, not to sound like a Rocky movie, but life's always going to put you on your butt at some point. The question is,
Mhm.
are you going to sit there and cry about it, or are you going to get off your ass and go to work? And so that's what I decided I was going to do. Because I mean, I had an elderly mother that needed some support financially, and so I had to get off my ass, and I did. And that's what drives me, and it still drives me today. I mean, maybe I'm a little, I will say to my wife, if we don't get a case in like every single day, oh, I'm going back to being broke, and she laughs at me. Um, but maybe that's, partly where my mentality comes from, because that's where I've been. And I promised myself and I promised my late father, I'm not going back there. We're
Right.
only going one way, and that's up. But you have to have grit in anything you do in life, especially to build a business. You really do, especially the first couple of years. It's like pushing a boulder up a hill. You got to keep pushing it. You just have to go to work every day. And,
Yeah.
that's what I do.
It's funny how people think when you own a business that your life is all like sunshine and rainbows, when really, when you put that hat on, you're taking full responsibility for every single thing, including all your employees. And I don't think a lot of people understand that. Um, yeah, well said. Grit, just kind of getting it done. Because, I find sometimes, I'll be sitting on the couch. I'm like, man, I should do that one thing. The quicker I jump to it, the more likely it's going to get done. Because if I sit there and ponder, my mind finds loopholes. So I just need to protect myself. I just need to protect myself from me sometimes. I even say that prayer, Lord, protect me from myself. Get me out of the way, because I don't know what it is. I'm always kind of putting the brakes on a little bit, and I'm like, no, that's not the way it works. You got to go, you got to push, you got to try today. And what I figured out is that, like, when you don't try on a particular day, it at the end of the day. You're like, that I could have done better, and I hate that feeling. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do. It's funny. I notice if for some reason, like the phone stops ringing, as if the calls slow down, I say, okay, either I'm doing something wrong or there's something I'm not doing, but something has to change. Right. And I'm on
Right.
the phone with my marketing guys, and I'm like, okay, what happened? Did Google change the algorithm? No, we're just having a slow day. It's okay. The world didn't come to an end.
Right.
So yeah, I'm with you, and I try to do stuff. I try to pace myself, because you're right, you can burn yourself out. But I know, I look at my calendar now and it's full. There are activities all day long that I know 90 days from now are going to move the business forward, which means we're going to be helping more people in 90 days from now, more people than we did today. I do
Right.
something every day. Sometimes it's one thing, sometimes it's three things. It just depends on the day.
You just keep that boulder moving. Just
You
keep
got
it
to keep
moving.
it moving, and
The only way to get to the top of the ladder is one rung at a time.
yeah, I mean, how do you eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time.
Yeah.
So, I
Yeah.
mean, and it's, sometimes it's easy to sort of sit on your successes, and I've been through that period too, where things started to go well, and then the wheels fell off. And,
Mhm.
the one thing that got me to where I was, I'd stopped doing because something else was working. So I didn't need to do it. And I got a little
Right.
fat and happy and proud of myself. And, then my world came crashing down. So, you know, you have to do all of the things to keep the ball moving all of the time. You cannot get complacent with anything, not with business, not with your personal life, nothing. You got to keep moving that ball forward in life. You just have to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Particle stays in motion. Particle
Exactly.
in
Yeah.
But
motion
right.
stays in motion. Yeah.
Yeah.
Particle at rest
What do
stays
they,
at rest.
what does it say? A body in motion
Well,
stays in motion.
a
Yeah.
particle in motion stays in motion. A
Right.
particle at rest stays at rest.
There
It's
we
quite
go.
simple.
Yeah. I like
Yeah,
that.
that's super cool. Now, are there any things that you do with the limited amount of time that you have to maybe get some stress relief? Are you doing any working out or any spiritual stuff, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So I try to get to the gym 4 days a week. I was practicing martial arts for a long time. I haven't done a lot in the last year because I got injured and ended up having surgery twice to fix my arm, and I got a bit lazy with that. But I'm going to get back into that. In fact, I'm going to try and go to a Muay Thai class this weekend. So I enjoy that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but I'll be honest with you, there's very few things that I do where I shut off. I mean, even if I'm in the gym, I'm checking my email, and it's a terrible habit. Um, you know, but it's hard for me to let go, which has been another issue, right? Because for the first 7 years, it was just me and my wife. By the way,
Yeah.
I didn't marry her. It took me 8 years to marry her. Like I said, I took responsibility for the business a long time before I took business, responsibility, for my personal life. So we're coming up on
Yeah.
our second anniversary. Um,
Congratulations.
you know, so for 7 years it was just the two of us, and then the last, almost 3 years now we've had staff. But one of the things it's been difficult for me is to sort of take my hand off the reins. Right? We
Hmm.
have two associates. We have two attorneys that we hired. They're both better lawyers than me. They still come to me for some guidance because I have about 20 years, more experience than them. But in terms of their skill set, they're way far advanced than me. So
Hmm.
I've had to say, okay, I'm not handling any more client cases. They do all the court running, right? Although I say that, I ended up in Sarasota just yesterday with no sleep, handling a case because we got a call. But so I've had to take my hands off the wheel. I now have 3 people that handle all of the intake calls. I used to do all of that stuff. I have
Yeah.
to let them do their thing. And again, they're better at it than me. So just letting go and allowing people to really develop their own skill set and trusting them to do the job has been challenging.
Yeah.
Because of course I can do everything better than anybody else. But that's not really true. I can't. They're actually better at whatever they do. They're better at it than me, which is why I'm hiring them to do it. So I can spend time going out there and doing what I really love to do, which is to share the mission. Because
Yeah.
I was a trial lawyer, so I love being in front of an audience. I'm good at public speaking. I'm comfortable doing that.
Yeah.
That's but that stuff, sharing the passion, sharing the mission, the core values of the firm are what really make the phone ring at the end of the day. Not
Yeah.
pay per click and all that other fun stuff. That helps. But at the end of the day, that people work with, if they're hiring a lawyer, it's because they know you, they trust you, and they think you can solve that problem for them.
Right.
And so they need to hear me speak and share the passion.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that is
Well,
hard. I mean, I would imagine that whole process of handing over, initially, especially just being like,
It's my
okay,
baby.
yes, as
yes, yeah, exactly. And you want to make sure that it's being fed properly and that, it's there, you think that there's only things that you can see, and so you have to look at the kid all the time. I totally get it. And that's pretty amazing that you recognize it. Most people don't. Most people are so eye on the prize, just looking at the target, that they're so tunnel vision they can't see anything else, and you recognize, you're like, okay, there's more going on here. I've got other people working. I've got this. I've brought these people in, and that's awesome. And I'm sure it's going to be super empowering to them to see you go, I trust you.
you're the heart of the
you know,
project. You're
Actually,
the heart of the project.
yeah,
You're pumping the blood
actually,
to the brain. You're pumping the blood to the hands. But as the heart of the project, you can't do all the thinking. You can't do all the reaching. You just got to keep pumping the blood to all those parts.
yeah, Dennis, I tell them because they know I do, I do a lot of this public speaking stuff, and I speak to other lawyers and podcasts and stuff, and they see me doing it. I'm like, don't get comfortable. We're going to be really, really busy 90 days from now, and look, we keep it on, I keep a close eye on how much time people are spending working because I don't want to burn my stuff out. So, I add support stuff like the attorneys. Each one has each associate has a paralegal and a legal assistant. They have 2 support staff, and there's always the office administrator they can go to. So I give them the tools to do the job, right?
right.
So they can do a good job for the client
Mm-hmm.
so that we get a great result and we save the family, right? Again,
Yeah.
it's all connected to that mission statement. But you have to set people up for success, not failure. And, I think for me, I've had to learn to be a good boss. And I think there's a fine line between, pushing somebody and saying, listen, you got to do a better job, and then patting them on the back when they do a great job,
Mm-hmm.
right? And encouraging them and supporting them. And even if they make a mistake, saying, okay, I got your back, no problem. Let's just move forward. And I've had to learn that. And I'm still a work in progress with that bit. Because it's not easy to be a boss, right? Because at
Right.
the end of the day, the buck stops with you, right? If they make a mistake and the client's all ticked off, they're mad at me, right?
Yeah.
Your associate dropped the ball.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. You're responsible for all of it. And that's a lot of pressure, a lot of trust you got to build, but that's
yep.
awesome that you're doing it. That's like one of the first big steps to growth. You know what I mean? Is not pushing, but being like, I need to trust somebody with this so I can focus on this. And
Well,
that's
one of
so
the first
cool
things
that,
I learned in leadership and training in the military was delegation.
yeah.
That's one of the
Yeah.
first accolades I got actually in a learning environment to be a leader was I got high marks for delegating properly and not trying to do it all myself. And you pick somebody that can do their strengths for when you need their strengths to be there, and you pick something that's their weakness when you need them to learn something, and you just kind of have to manage all of that and know people and know what their abilities are, and use them where you need to. Like in an emergency situation, the strongest person has to be the strongest person. But when it's not an emergency person or a situation, maybe the weakest person gets put out there to see if they can grow some strength. And that's just very
Mhm.
simple. It's a term to put it because I'm talking about running around with guns and bullets. But it's leadership training, and it transitions into the business world too. You got to know your people.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
how can you build a business and help lots of people if you don't allow anybody else to do their job? I mean, you can only work so many days a week, so many hours in the day, and I mean, how many people could I really help? I couldn't
Right.
I couldn't write a blog post, do a podcast, and help 3 clients in one day. It just can't be done. But if
Right.
I'm allowing my staff to do their job, wow, now we can help a whole lot more people. Right.
Mhm.
So I think that your point is well taken.
Yeah.
Well, I think what
So
you're doing is
let's
great. I'm loving what I'm hearing.
Yeah, let's
Thanks. I
rewind a
appreciate
little
that.
bit so the listeners who maybe don't understand the situations and why couldn't a family just handle this on their own, and they think that if it happened to them they'd be able to handle the situation. So just to kind of like put it all together. So imagine you have a child, and that child has a learning disability growing up, right? And you're able to, for the longest time, because it's a child and it's smaller than you're able to kind of manage it, get through it, learn a lot about how to handle kind of crises and how to bring that person down and regulate them and the meds and all that kind of stuff. But at some point, that child becomes an adult. And it becomes hard at a certain point to tell your adult child with a mental disability that they can't do something that they want to do, especially if that child is strong, because you'll run into many individuals who are just in the situation that you said, and they are so dang strong and could be a danger to themselves, but also a danger to others, that it becomes a situation that becomes unmanageable. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, look, once somebody is 18 or over, they get to make decisions about how they live their life. And what we invariably see, Cam, is we see a situation where you've got, the adult child in the middle and the families on the outside, parents, siblings, and they're like, we don't understand. Why is this person not able to live their life, right? Why are they flunking out of school? Do they keep getting fired? You're hanging out
Right.
with people that are terrible for them. There's a complete failure to launch, right?
Hmm.
Or they're using, this legalized marijuana, by the way, has been a disaster here in Florida, and I think in other states too. They're using,
Yeah.
they're using gummies or vaping or smoking or whatever it happens to be, and now they're paranoid and delusional, by the way. And the family's like, we don't understand. Why can't they see this? And meanwhile, the adult child's like, I'm fine. There's nothing wrong with me. I don't understand what
Yeah.
all the fuss is. You guys probably should go see a therapist to get over this because I'm perfectly okay. This is very
Right.
normal for me. And so
Yeah, but
what I explained
then
to the
they're stealing
families,
from the family members
yeah,
and breaking things from the family members or attacking the family members,
yeah,
are living off the family members, and their family members can't support them anymore. You need to be an adult and go get a job, and they don't want a job. They don't want
Yeah.
to move out of the house.
It
Like I said, I got
happens. It
several. I can
literally
tell
it
you.
literally happens. And I don't think a
Yeah,
lot of people understand that those are situations that can get very volatile. Um,
yeah.
you know, and
It can,
and
it can, and it does, pour into violence. And you've also got some enabling, right? The parents don't know what to do. Should we, there's sort of, you sometimes you have mom and dad, they're butting heads. Dad says, I'm done. I'm not giving him any money. He's out the house. Well, now he's
hmm
on the streets or he's couch surfing. That doesn't solve the problem. And mom says, well, I don't want him couch surfing or being on the street. So we need to support him financially. And if he needs a car and he needs this, we got to give it to him. That doesn't solve the problem either. But because what you're dealing with is somebody who has a disease, and that disease has basically kidnapped their brain. Right.
yeah.
And I know that, and I say to the families, it looks like your loved one. It sounds like your loved one. It looks like your loved one, but it is not your loved one. Their brain has been kidnapped by whatever trauma they suffered way back when. Right.
Hmm.
So expecting them to even appreciate the fact that they are sick is just simply not going to happen. And if you can help the family to understand the dynamics, and they say,
Hmm.
oh, okay, I get it. It's not really them. Yeah, it's not really them right now, which is why you cannot rationalize with them, right? Which is why throwing them out in the streets or funding their lifestyle does not accomplish the goal, which is to get them into treatment so that whatever trauma they've suffered can be addressed. Their substance use, their mental illness, getting them on the right meds, whatever it happens to be from a clinical perspective, can be addressed. But
Yeah.
listen, what I sell is hope. I don't sell a magic pill or a magic wand, because recovery is a journey. It takes time to get somebody not only in recovery, but for them to develop the skills and habits they need so they can stay in recovery for the rest of their life. And
Yeah.
the recovery is not just about the child, it's about the family. Because you see, by
Mm,
the time the family comes to us, this has been going on for 5 years, 10 years, even longer. The whole family is sick and traumatized, and they have to do their own work, because
yeah.
otherwise, in a year's time, their loved ones over here are doing great, and they're still over here living in the universe they were, you know, before we all started, and it causes a problem. So everybody has to heal in their own way, but it
Yeah.
does take time. I tell families, this is a year-long journey. You don't have to
Hmm.
hire me for a year, but in 12 months, things can look very different if you all do the work. But it's going to take time. This isn't the movies where, your loved one goes to sleep for 72 hours, wakes up in a cold sweat, and they're great to go. That doesn't
Right.
happen in the real world.
A
Not in my
recovery
world anyway.
montage.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't work that way. They're sick. It's going to take time for them to heal.
Yeah.
And it
So,
it must be very hard for a parent because, you've been taking care of this person forever, right? And I know from being an alcoholic that at my worst, when people were telling me to stop drinking, I no longer saw them as like someone who's trying to help me. They were trying to get in between me and the thing that was making them feel better. Now, that can cause someone to use manipulation. And I can only imagine what a child would say to a parent who's threatening to cut him off financially, which really means I'm cutting you off from the substance, or you're not getting that flow from me anymore. And the reaction they get probably isn't, they probably see it as like a loved one saying, "Oh, you don't love me anymore. You don't love me." But like you said, it's the addiction talking, saying,
Yeah.
basically saying anything it has to get what they need.
What's that one thing that they said? Somebody said, we talked about it before, Cam. Addiction is a solution to a problem. That's what causes the addiction, because you're taking the alcohol to fix your PTSD. I drink too much to fix my sleeping. Some people use drugs and harder drugs to fix their trauma that they're feeling, because it gives them the dopamine release. It makes them feel better. So it's seen as a solution to them in their mind. So to try to tell them it's not a solution, it's hard for them to understand too.
Right.
yeah, Cam, you're in recovery,
Yeah, I'm 8 years sober.
and I have a question. What do you do to maintain sobriety?
I attend AA meetings. I could do a better job with that. But the big things I do, well, I take my medicine, so I'm stable for my PTSD. I meditate, which has given me a tremendous amount of relief. Physical fitness, I lost a bunch of weight. I'm watching what I eat. And faith. Faith was a huge thing to me. Now, I do know from my recovery that nothing again was going to change until I picked up my cross and bared it, until I was ready to get
Part of the
sober.
12 steps.
Yeah, for me, you know what I mean? Like you can, and a lot of people don't understand it, but you can't always lead a horse to water and expect it to drink, like that horse has to decide it's thirsty, and you could be doing everything. You could be getting someone in recovery. You could be throwing money all over the place. You'd be getting the lawyers. You could be handling the court cases, but until that person is ready, they're not going to do anything, because no one does anything for anyone else, it seems. You know what I mean? Yes, in rare cases, if you have a child or a family, that's depending on you and you got to get sober and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, it must be really, really hard when you're talking to someone who was like me, who was using alcohol to feel better. It wasn't about like getting drunk. It was like feeling better in a way, feeling a false sense of control, almost like a pause button every day. Oh, I'm not going to fix it today. I'll fix it tomorrow. I'll fix it that sort of thing. But, and talking about it, being on here and talking about it and owning my sobriety and owning how hard it was to get sober is a huge, huge thing for me, because it holds me accountable. And
And
Dennis
golf.
as well.
And golf.
And golf. Yeah.
I think it's interesting you say that, and I asked that question only because we've been very blessed. I've got a lot of close friends. One of my closest friends has been in recovery for about the same time as you, and ironically, I'd been on the phone with him before we jumped on this, and he said, "I have only have a few minutes. I'm going to a meeting." And I've noticed that people that experience long-term recovery do something on a pretty much, if not daily basis, certainly on a weekly basis to maintain recovery. So I appreciate that you shared that because, yeah, I mean, you just have to keep working on it. It's not something that, like I said, it's not a destination. It's a journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at this point, I'm literally scared of it because I know how deep I got. I know kind of like the hole I had to climb out of and like what it took. And know how quickly it can get his claws back in me. It's so scary because even just watching TV, you see a beer commercial and I'll literally think, man, that would be nice. And I have to redirect even my sight and look up and to the left and say, I'm an alcoholic with an alcoholic mind. So that's happening every day. If I walk into a gas station and there's alcohol there, I have to like remind myself I am an alcoholic with an alcoholic mind. That alcoholic mind is going to tell me that it makes sense to drink poison that could destroy my entire life. You know, it makes so I have an addiction is almost like a mental obsession. You know, it's like you just can't get it out of your mind. Everything leads to a drink, whether it's a good day, a bad day, whether it's anything. If there's a football game on, or if there's, you know, like anything, you can turn into a drink. And I was so guilty of that, good or bad. I was always going to drink, and especially after I got hurt, when I felt like a victim, I was very much pouring into my sorrow. And it's funny what you'll do to find some relief, because but then what's crazy is always that earthly thing turns into a problem on its own, and it did for me. And yeah, it's scary. It is terrifying to be in the grips of something, especially when you for the longest time believed you could pull yourself out of it anytime you wanted, and then when you try to do so, it's near impossible, and your body's telling you you have to drink. Yeah, it's scary when you get into it, and you think you'll never be that person, especially being a former police officer. How many calls have I been on where there's a person just out of their mind drunk, and I'm like, dude, just stop drinking, you know what I mean? And then I'm no longer a police officer, you know, trying to recover from alcohol. Just it could happen to anybody. And I've been in AA meetings where I'm sitting next to a doctor, I'm sitting next to a homeless person. They could be white, they could be black, they could be Asian, whatever. They could be any religion, whatever. But everyone in that room, in that AA meeting, all have basically submitted to the fact that they are powerless over alcohol. I think that's the exact words. We've come to the belief that we are powerless over alcohol.
I think what you describe is is when you're in crisis, right? I think we're all hardwired to a certain degree to try and survive. And a lot of what you're sharing, and I'm very grateful and humble that you have, because a lot of what you're sharing is what we hear from family members, parents who say, and they describe the kind of scenario that you're talking about, Cam. And what I've learned from speaking to thousands of families is that a lot of because they say, well, I don't understand. I'm like, why does he do this? Why does she do this? And I'm like, I want you to think of it from a different perspective, because what they're really trying to do is to survive. And sometimes that survival mode is literally going from minute to minute, hour to hour, day to day. And I know
Yeah.
that it looks like insanity to you, but they're in survival mode. Something has triggered this. And I always ask families, like, has there been a traumatic brain injury? Has there been some kind of physical or sexual trauma? There's something here that triggered the trauma, which is what's causing them to be in this crazy survival mode, right?
Yeah.
And it looks like crazy behavior, but in their mind, they're like, okay, how do I get through the day? How do I get, all of this stuff, which is what you're describing. But this is something we hear on a daily basis, and for us, it's almost become normal to hear the story. But this is the insanity, if I can use that word, that a family is dealing with when they have somebody in the family who is really not well. These are
And it's
the kinds of cases that we get, and maybe this sort of
It can be
encapsulates
draining
it.
for them.
What's that,
yeah.
Dennis?
It could be draining for them. Like, it is a level of insanity, but I think if somebody didn't like that word, maybe it can just be like it's just emotionally draining, going around in circles over and over again, the same, and getting no different results, but just the same
Yeah.
cycles
Y-
of
y-
abuse of whatever it is.
Dennis, I can't tell you how many crying mothers I've spoken to over the years. I
I
mean,
bet.
it's the family comes to us and they're just exhausted. I mean, I always ask them one question, and the question I ask is, when was the last time you had a good night's sleep? And they all give me the same answer. They're like, it's been so long, we don't remember the last time we had a good night's sleep. The stress, the worrying about this person, it
Mhm.
it really does. I mean, you're a military guy. You don't get enough sleep, and eventually that takes its toll on you, and you start to shut down. And that's what happens with these families. They come to us, and they're really close to saying, "We're done. We'll just leave it in the hands of God and be done with it." So when I
Yeah.
say I'm selling hope, that's what I'm talking about. Is okay, I get it. You're done, right? You were exhausted. You've been dealing with this for a long time. You probably spent a boatload of money, and I'm asking you to take one more leap of faith that we can finally get this thing on the right road. And
Yeah, but
sometimes
you've
they
been
can't.
going down a road with other families for a while now that you have a roadmap to some success. So you're not only just selling hope, you're also selling some promise of delivery because it's worked before if they'll follow the steps. So, don't sell yourself short that you just give them a hope pill. It's like, hey, come on, I've been to this road before, so this is the forks in the road. These are the directions you got to go. If you follow me, I can get you there.
Yeah, and
Um,
look, and I appreciate you saying that. I think the other thing that Cam talked about that was sort of resonating with me was, and it's sad to say, but the idea that we can save everybody. So I'm a realist too. When I first started doing this for like 10 years ago, I was talking to a good friend of mine who was a clinician, and she'd been doing this a long time. And I said, Michelle, I said, I'm going to save everybody. I know it. And she said, I love your passion, but it's not realistic. And I also know, and I've experienced this, that maybe at least once a year, we'll either get a call from a family who's lost a loved one, or we'll touch base with a family who decided not to move forward. And then a couple months afterwards, they passed. And so those are really tough phone calls to deal with. They're gut wrenching because we take the work personally, and I say, okay, what did we do wrong? Or should I push the family more and said, do this, do this? But at the end of the day, you can't. It's about giving
no.
families options. They have to make the decision for themselves. Nobody likes
And
to
you
be
have
told
to
what to
control
do.
what you can control too.
Yeah, I can't. It's interesting. Funny enough, today was one of those days. I'd had a woman I had represented who had been sucked into Florida's mental health system. I got her out, and then the husband wrote to me this morning saying, a couple months later, she overdosed and died. So, I mean, what do you say? I mean, you just have some empathy and try to be there for the person. But we get those calls, and they're not fun to deal with. I'm not a car accident lawyer who says, "Well, I got your money." No, I didn't. I mean, we're dealing with life and death here.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So,
And I hope that those families don't always feel that life or death is hinging on them. Although it feels that way, it's really hard to help somebody if they're like me and I literally didn't really want to live anymore. So why would I recover from the thing that's making me feel better if I'm just almost wanting to die, you know? So you almost have to recover that person from those feelings. I'll share another thing if this helps anyone listening to this, but I've talked about it before. When I got shot, not only did I have PTSD from being shot because I thought I was dead. I said my last prayer, but almost immediately it brought up memories of a childhood trauma that I had never spoke to anybody about. So I'm dealing with something that happened to me as a 5-year-old that I've dealt with guilt and shame and never talked to somebody or processed it with. And this new thing just happened, which activated that thing. And now I'm dealing with both. I'm too ashamed to talk about what happened to me as a little kid, you know? So I'm stuck over it just things get complicated and people can act very strange. And I can speak to that. But I will say that when we're making these crazy decisions, we're not in a happy place. You know, we're not.
That's true.
We're not in a happy place. Um, and a lot of times the work that needs to be done seems too hard. So like you said before, and Dennis was saying one rung at a time, I had to take my sobriety 24 hours at a time to start. I mean, it was hour to hour. I was sometimes looking at my watch at the seconds, just to get through the next part and to get to the next part. If I can get through this, that's all that matters. And it started with very, very small steps after I had decided that I didn't want to die by alcohol after I had been shot in the face and survived that. I couldn't get past that. I could, and you don't know this, but I had a near death experience a year later when I was in a coma. I ended up in a drug induced coma. I had Press syndrome, which was giving me seizures. And then when I was in the hospital, I went into alcohol withdrawal, which then ended up with pneumonia, then double pneumonia, and my right lung collapsed. I was on a ventilator for 5 weeks. And I had a near death experience where I literally got to cross over and hold my grandma's hand in heaven. And then I came back with that in my mind too. Okay, so heaven is real. So if I die, it means that there's something afterwards. And that kind of like course corrected me a little bit out of fear. And then I don't know how it happened that first. Oh, actually, I do remember. Yeah, I remember. I went to my therapist one day and I told her that I had been drinking, that it was out of control. Then she told me, you're going to do three things if you want to keep working with me. One is you're going to call your wife right now and you're going to have her go to the house. She was at work. I had to call her. She was at the house, or I had to tell her to go to the house, get rid of all the alcohol, including the bottles that I had hidden, which I had to tell her about. Then I had to go to my parents' house, so I had somewhere to go in between. So I didn't end up going to a bar or buy a bottle. And then I had to go to my first AA meeting that night. And by God's grace, that's what got me into the AA program. My wife has been super supportive and helped me even the second night as I was crying in a parking lot when I couldn't find the meeting. She was like, it's okay. You're going to be all right. Just take a breath. You're at the right location. So it took a lot of teamwork and all that kind of stuff. And I'll be paying her back for the rest of my life. But I tell you what, you don't think you're going to be an addict, but when you end up being one, it sucks. But it's recoverable. You just have to put in the work. You have to put in the work. And before you know it, the thing that took you down is actually going to build you some resilience. And actually, you're going to start feeling good about it. Uh, not having to take a drink is a huge deal, and then eventually my
Higher power.
thirst for alcohol declined, like it wasn't like like at the beginning I had to have root beer bottles in my hands because it reminded me of a beer bottle, so I would sip on that and it was sweet too, so that would help. Anyways, I went off on a little bit of a tangent there, but I am just amazed that you're doing this work, and I'm glad that you understand that
It's
you
relatable.
can't make a horse drink. You can lead it to water and give it the best opportunity. But at that point, kind of it's in their hands and in God's hands. That must be a hard
Yeah,
thing to let go.
one of the terms that I learned from a good friend of mine who was a coach of mine, who was himself was in recovery, was the term miracle of recovery. So I think for folks that are watching this, when they say you can, this is the miracle of recovery, because it is a miracle, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I hate to use the term that you went to hell and back, because you told me that you went to heaven, but I mean, I think
Well, he started there.
yeah, I mean, I think for the folks that are watching, this is the miracle of recovery right here.
And what's cool is when you when you first get into like a program, yes, you're going to hide in the back the first meeting. You know what I mean? You're going to have your head down, hat down, all that kind of stuff. But what happens is you start hearing bits and pieces of people bearing stories and almost secrets that you would never tell in public, but then you hear truth in it. You're like, I've been there, I've done that, I've thought that, and you start learning from one another as a community. And before you know it, you start watching the new guys coming in and you're like, hey, this helped me when I started, and you just start getting into service and that sort of stuff and building other people up. And when you build other people up, it really, really gets you going in the program, because
Yeah,
you're grinding.
I kind of have a feeling, as I sit here, that this is cathartic for you, this podcast. I
Yeah.
think this is part of your recovery. It's
Oh,
almost
yeah.
like a mini AA meeting, right? That you guys are
It
doing
is.
together, you and Dennis. And I can see it. I see it in your face, right? This is a cathartic thing for you. So I feel blessed that I could be here in a
We're
meeting
happy
with you.
you're
It
here.
feels like a little
We
meeting.
say every time we get together, we say if there's only three things that we really expect to happen, that we can help each other. Like I want to, talking to him helps me. Hearing him talk helps him. And then we get you on talking about stuff and it helps you even a little bit. And if
It
one
does.
person is listening, one person listening helps them go in the right direction. And it plants that one seed under a tree that we won't even see the shade of, as Cam likes to say.
Yeah.
Then it's been worth it. And so, yeah, we want to save them all, but if he's going to just save one,
Yeah, I mean,
focus on.
that's what I tell my friends. It's like, they're like, oh, why do you do all these podcasts? Why don't you do a podcast where there's millions of people viewing? And I'm like, I never actually checked to see who's listening because it doesn't matter. If one person
Right.
was listening, that's all that
Yeah.
matters. If one person hears it, but sometime between now and when I shuffle off the planet, then it was worth it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Who cares who's listening? If one person hears it, that's enough.
Well, you'll
It's
be
always
happy to
good to
know
run
we're at
into-
178th place of all the self-help podcasts in Finland. Let's see if I can say that better. We are 178 out of self-help podcasts in Finland. We just got that random stat like a week or two ago.
Okay.
There's probably only 178, but
I haven't had a client yet from Finland, but go Finland.
Yeah.
Go Finland.
But other people
Now,
are listening too. So
Now, if anyone would like to reach out to you who's in a situation and they want advice, counseling, your services, where would they reach out? And I'm also going to put that into the information attached to the episode so people will be able to see it there. But if you would.
Yeah. So our main website is mentalhealthaddictionlawfirm.com. That's mentalhealthaddictionlawfirm.com. And if for some reason you can't find me or find the website, just Google my name, Mark Astor. I have about 600 videos out on YouTube. So I do one almost every day. I shoot it on my phone. I upload it because I'm a big believer that people should be able to get the information they need and shouldn't have to pay for it. They should be able to get it for free. So I give a lot away. And I base the videos on, it may be on a question that I've been asked or a case or a call, or I base it on the real world stuff because anybody can go online and read a statute. But how does it work in the real world? And how does it work in South Florida? And how does it work in North Florida? Because there's a difference, right? I mean, the way these cases are handled depends on not just who the judge is, but which county you're in. And so I say, listen, if you're in this, you're in this part of Florida, I probably wouldn't file that kind of case. I'd file this. And so I try to share that information. So if for some reason you cannot find the website, just Google my name. There's videos all over the place, and they're on Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram and TikTok and Vimeo and YouTube. And I'm going to tell you, I'm not a techie guy, but even I figured that stuff out. So I'm out there, and you can get the information you need for free. On the website, there's an ebook. You can download it for free. So, and if you call my office and you can speak to either Brittany or Jeff or Jacqueline who run my intake, and you can speak to them for free. They'll give you all the resources that you need. And if for some reason we don't think that we can help you, or you're just not ready to hire a lawyer, maybe you want to do an intervention. Fabulous way to get people into treatment. I'll refer you to an interventionist. That's okay. I'm good with that. I'm going to share with you we're going to give you the options I think that can best help your family. And then you decide what's right for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
awesome.
And last but not least, I like to ask the question, if someone were feeling hopeless out there right now, what would you say to them to get them to keep going?
I think as Winston Churchill once said, if you're going through hell, keep going. He's maybe one of the people that I find inspiration. And then there's, of course, being a martial arts guy, Bruce Lee, right? There is no try. Do or not do, right? So do it. Do it. Keep moving forward. Because, and that's the other thing, nothing lasts forever, right? Good times don't last forever, and neither do bad. And I know if I'm having a crappy day, I go to sleep, tomorrow's a new day. And so there's always help. And obviously, this podcast, I mean, you guys are helping a lot of people, and maybe you don't always know it, but this is inspirational stuff. I mean, I know we talked about before we went live, and I was like, oh my God. I was like, okay, I'm not going to be good enough. My story's not nearly as good as theirs. I don't know if I can even share it because, I mean, the name of the podcast, right? Shit Creek Survivors. You guys are real Shit Creek Survivors. I just hit a little road bump.
We're all
You guys
Shit
got
Creek
hit. You guys
survivors.
got run over by a Mack truck.
Well, you have in your
and then
own way
backed
too.
over for good word. I mean, seriously.
Well,
So thank you for
is
having
it
me.
absolutely, and what a blessing to have you on, and what a blessing to come in contact with a like-minded individual who's pouring into other people and not
Yeah.
asking, not waiting for his cup to be filled by them at the same time. Does that make sense? I'm just
It
saying,
does.
like
Yeah.
someone who's giving without expectation of receiving, pouring into people. I've heard before at the end of our lives, we get a review, I didn't have my review when I went to heaven, but it turns out I wasn't there long enough, but you get a life review. And what I've learned recently is you don't get a life review from your perspective. You get a life review from everyone else's perspective who
Oh, that's
interacted with
great.
you. So you are, sir, creating quite a reel. So keep doing what you're doing. And
I've
if we can serve you in any purpose, reach out to us. If you need me to talk to someone who's in a similar situation as I've been, I can do that too. All right. So
Yeah.
before I leave, can I tell you guys a joke? I heard this joke a little while ago. I want to share,
Absolutely.
and
yeah.
because you guys started talking about heaven, so here's the story, and I'm gonna preface this by telling you I heard Ronald Reagan tell this joke. It was on YouTube, and I thought it was hilarious. So here's the deal, right? There's a priest and a politician both die on the same day, right? They get buried, they have the funeral, and the next thing you know, they find themselves at the pearly gates to heaven, and there's Saint Peter, and he welcomes the politician, he welcomes the priest, the father, and he says, "Okay, I'm going to take you to your respective residences." So he says, "Father, let me take you first." So he takes the priest, takes him into this building, and there's this just single room, and they open the door, and in the room, there's just like this one small little bed on a wrought iron frame. Looks like it came out of the local county jail. There's one closet for clothes, and there's this sink, and that's it. I mean, it's very vanilla. It's as plain as it can be. And so he says, "Father, this is your quarters." Father says, "Great, thank you." He says to the politician, "Come with me." Takes the politician. They walk down the street. There's this magnificent house, 10,000 square feet, 7 bedrooms, uh, 4-car garage. There's a gym. There's a pool. I mean, you name it, this thing has it. And the politician says to St. Peter, "I don't understand. You know, I saw where you took the father. He's lived this life, and he has been, he's been a good man. He's worshipped God. He's done everything he can for his community. And you took him to his quarters, and it's this plain room with a little wrought iron bed, a closet, for a few clothes and a sink." He's like, "And me, you took me down the street. I have this magnificent mansion. It's 10,000 feet. It has 7 bedrooms, 4-car garage, a pool, a gym, you name it, it's there. I don't understand it." St. Peter looks at him and says, "Well, you don't understand, sir. We've never had one of your type come up here before."
That's
I thought
really
it was
good.
funny. And when you started talking
That
about heaven, I was like, I'm going to tell him the joke before I get done.
I
I
love it.
appreciate it.
I hope you guys like that. So
That was very good. Perfect.
thank you.
Well, I'm just gonna
Thank you, President Reagan.
I'm gonna hit stop. That's a wrap for this week's episode of Shit Creek Survivors. I hope Mark's insight inspired you to face challenges with grit, hope, and resilience. Remember, recovery and healing aren't just about the individual. Families grow stronger together. If you found some value in this conversation, share it with someone who needs it. Subscribe to the podcast and leave a comment with your biggest takeaway. We're all Shit Creek survivors learning to paddle with purpose. Keep going, and I'll see you on the next episode.